Hey, everybody, and welcome to episode number 32, guest number 32 of Boutique Talk. My name is Jake Boston, otherwise known as Steelbook Obsessed on all your major social media platforms. And if you want to listen to all things physical media related, then you come to the right place. Every week, I have on a new guest to talk about their physical media journey. And tonight, my guest is an actor who has appeared in The Other Guys, the Angry Birds movie, and TV episodes of Conan, Curb Your Enthusiasm, and Brooklyn Nine-Nine, just to name a few. He is also a comedian, podcaster, and content creator, which is how I started watching him religiously when he started watching a different videotape every single day this year. It's Mat McCarthy. How's it going, man?
Well, hello there.
Hi, thanks for coming on, man. I appreciate it. I've been watching your stuff for a while. We've been TikTok mutuals for a hot minute.
Yes.
That's how you know it's official.
That's how you know we're real people now.
Absolutely. Well, I really wanted to get you on here because I feel like you've been collecting pretty much your entire life. Sure. And it's just like growing. Like I see that room behind you and I see it like expanding in your garage too. I just kind of want to talk about the madness that is a collection that size.
Yeah. Oh man, I love talking about it. We had a party the other night and we just had some friends over. We did karaoke in the living room. Mm-hmm. And like we put the cats in the laundry room, we put the dog in the bedroom, and I just had both doors of my office open. And I'm like, come on in, everybody. There's no point in having this collection just for myself. Because it's so funny. People are like, is it okay if I go in your office and look at the movies? I'm like, okay. That's why they're there. I want you to come see it.
Yes. Do you ever have family members come over that have no idea what you collect or anything? Because that's happened to me a handful of times. And I either get like a, whoa, that's awesome, or a, why are you doing this type look, like baffled.
Well, my family's still all in Rhode Island, and we go back there to visit. Nobody comes out here to visit. I'm in Los Angeles, and it's pretty well known that I have a big movie collection, but I don't know that they know that it's gotten to this point. Like I remember some point in the last few years mentioning to my dad, I was like, well, I've got like an IKEA bookcase just full of movies. And he's just like, oh, gee, oh, with your VHS tapes. Oh, but I'm like, yeah, well, you started it. You're the one who bought a VCR when I was 5 and broke my brain.
Did you have a big collection of VHS tapes growing up as a kid then?
We almost exclusively just taped things off of TV. We had HBO when I was really small, which at the time I thought it was just because they had Fraggle Rock and it was just for me. But like looking back now, I realized surely my parents were watching movies or boxing or George Carlin or something. Mm-hmm. And then eventually they canceled that. And then when I was like in my late aughts, I don't know, like 8, 9, 10, we had Cinemax. And I'll never understand why we had Cinemax instead of HBO, but we had Cinemax for a while. And again, it was like, Little Shop of Horrors is starting. I'm going to tape that, That was basically, we didn't really have the first like official release VHS tape that I ever had. I still have it. Christmas 1989, my brother gave me Batman. And I was just like, it's still holding it in my hand. I'm like, this is the coolest thing in the world. I can just watch Batman right now. Mm-hmm. But I remember my brother and sister are like 9 and 10 years older. I remember being at my sister's apartment when she was in college. So sometime in the late 80s, early 90s. And a roommate of hers having Raiders of the Lost Ark. And I remember like being just blown away by it and like seeing it sitting there on the table and being like, wow, that is so cool. Because also it's like, keep in mind in the 80s, it was a rental market. It was not a retail market for VHS. And you'll still find original issued VHS that, sometimes even have the suggested retail price on the back of like upwards of $50, $60, $70, $80, $90. It's wild.
Yeah. finding those promo tapes is really fun, just to see like, hey, for you video stores out there, come buy a few of these. Here's our video for free, and you can see how much we run it for. This is how much it made. I have one for the Mighty Ducks. It's like it made a whopping $28 million at the box office. Buy as many as possible. It's just kind of fun to have like a nice
That's
little
hilarious.
vault there. Yeah.
Yeah.
Very much so. So that your family started collecting VHS tapes when you got your own place. Was it VHS or was it more DVD, or when did you start really like collecting super heavy yourself?
I mean, as soon as I went to college, so 1997, I had a VHS collection, and I had amassed, in high school, grade school and high school, I had amassed, a pretty decent collection of, again, stuff I was taping off of TV, movies off of movie channels, and pay-per-view, ordering, like, I still have my copy of Scrooged from probably 1988 or 89, that I ordered on pay-per-view. But then once I was in high school and I had a job as like a lifeguard, it was like, well, I'm going to spend my money on CDs and VHS tapes. And then once I went to college, I was in New York City, and it was like VHS were starting to get cheaper. And it wasn't because of the DVD market, but just like it was just an oversaturated, like fat, like there were too, like it's wild to me that people have like gotten fooled by this whole like sealed VHS and graded VHS. It's like these could not be more common movies.
The Disney clamshells are worth thousands of dollars. That drives me nuts.
Oh my God, don't even get me going. So yeah, so then once I was in college, it was kind of, I would go into the city, I'd go to Tower Records or Record Explosion and just, Clockwork Orange. It's $6. Hell yeah, absolutely. But then once DVDs broke, and VHS became like change, like pocket change, then the collection got out of control because I was just like, oh, this isn't even like, I'm not even being affected financially by this. Like, I don't care about the space that it takes up. I mean, this is just wonderful. And then once that shift happened, when like going to the secondhand stores, and there used to be a couple of DVDs, and then all of a sudden one day it was just all DVDs, and then VHS kind of vanished even from the secondhand market, and I was just like, all right, I'll just buy some DVDs too. So it's always been a little bit of everything. And then Blu-rays have always crept in, and now 4Ks and goddamn laser discs. It's crazy.
Yeah, I think I have all of the above of those as well, but I think I have like a random Betamax, a couple random like CEDs. Like sometimes you're just out and about, you find a format that you don't have, and like I feel like I need something like that in the collection just to say I have it,
Right. I remember at the old Amoeba Records, I always kept eyeballing this copy of, I think it was Out for Justice, that they had on Super 8. And I was just like, I could never justify it because I'm like, what is the point? Because I never want to have something just to have it. Like I do want to watch it. I really don't want a trophy. I want a movie that I'm going to watch, which is another aspect of hey, this tape is sealed. I'm like, then open it, watch it, watch the movie. What are you doing?
Yeah, I bought a Laserdisc a lot, and I would say a good 30 out of those like 120 were sealed. I'm like, what is the point of even buying this stuff, especially back then? Because this collection was from like 20 years ago, back when they were like relatively new, and you would still see prices.
Oh yeah,
Laserdiscs were insanely expensive.
That was the 4K of the day. That was the boutique high-end collector market. And it's funny because like people don't know. Like they'll see Laserdiscs and they think that it died off, in the early 80s or something. And I'm like, no, this was a high-end market well into like the late 90s. I mean, there were still people who had their heels dug in even when DVDs showed up. They're like, yeah, it can't be as good as the Laserdisc. And they were right, because it was analog. So it actually was better,
Yeah, they just stopped kind of using the format because DVD got insanely popular with everybody. It was just a cheaper way to kind of produce this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But yeah, Laserdisc, that's how Criterion started. And I feel like they still, like, they've
Yeah.
just been kind of riding that high end wave ever since Laserdisc, because that was like the
Oh, for
pinnacle for
sure.
what you could collect for. And yeah, it's just been going and going. And now I think they're like 1,200 titles deep. It's kind of insane.
Because it's funny when, because Amoeba Records in Hollywood, they still have a pretty decent video section. It's not like it used to be. You know, when they were at the old spot, near the Cinerama, it was huge. It was like almost like a warehouse of records and CDs,
Mhm.
and then the upstairs was all movies, VHS and DVDs and Blu-rays and whatnot. And the Laserdisc section was, it's still pretty much as big as it always was at the new location. It's the VHS section that is like, it breaks my heart because it's like nothing. It's just like one, tiny little bookshelf over in the corner. It used to be, a section onto itself, the VHS, but the laser discs, they were like 4, 5, or 6 bins, and then like you could just dig through them like the records. And some of them are cheap, and some of them were like, this is a random title, but they would never be like, I think maybe the most you'd pay for something like $30 or something. But if you went downstairs into the classical music section,
Mhm.
there was an equal amount of laser discs down there that were all operas.
Oh, jeez.
And it made perfect sense to me. I was like, of course, because in the 80s, a section of the market that was buying these high-end laser discs were these yuppies. And it was
Mhm.
like, it's Lilith and Frasier and Woody Allen, like listening to, like, oh, we just got the laser disc of the Flautermaus. We're going to watch it tonight on our high-end system. I was like, this is too perfect. Of course. It fits right in with that demo.
I have a few of those music laser discs, and I have not popped them in because I just there's so many different ways to listen to music. I don't even know if there's like music videos and stuff on there, or if it's just like a freaking background that plays. I really have no idea.
I have some that are music video and concerts, and then I have one that's like the size of a 45.
Hmm,
But it is a laser disc, and
weird.
you pop it in the thing. I think it's some 80s band, it's Animotion or something.
Yeah. Kind of going back to VHS because that's the majority of your collection, or is it? Do you know how your collection breaks down before we go into that? Because I know you have a collection there and in the garage, but I want to say
Mhm.
that room, the majority of it looks like it's VHS tapes.
Um, it might be, I don't know, it's deceptive because the DVDs take up, like, they're so much slimmer.
Hmm.
Um, so it might be, I don't know. I mean, put it this way, because of the taped off of TV or used blanks, whatever you want to call them, those VHS, I don't catalog those necessarily in, like, I'll use CLZ Movie app.
Yeah.
Um, so I may have more DVDs just because, especially, going to Goodwill out here in LA, you just get so much random stuff
Right.
available, especially movie stuff, obviously. So I couldn't say. I mean, it might be neck and neck between, like, if I included but I mean, if I include like loose DVDs, like in the wrestling collection, because
Mm.
I have a lot of like DVD-Rs, like I have like a couple of binders of like, 200 or 300 each. Then there's no question it's more DVDs than anything. But it's one of those things where I'm like, like I heard somebody say once, they were like, well, do you want to know the top 5 concerts I've ever been to, including Kiss concerts or not including Kiss concerts? Because it's a different list. So like,
Mhm.
including wrestling DVDs, it's a whole different kettle of fish.
I gotcha. Yeah, that's a lot. The majority of my collection, I would say 98% of it is just like retail stuff. I have some of like the bootlegged or DVD-R recorded stuff. You've made an entire like daily video based on, hey, I found this random videotape. Let's put it in. It could be what's on the label, could not be. What made you start that series? Is it just something that you've loved watching for a while now?
Yeah, it's kind of like the old adage, they say, write what you know, and that, or work smarter, not harder. That really made sense to me when I was like, like everybody during the pandemic, during the lockdown, it was like, well, I'll see what's on TikTok. And I was, I'm a comedy guy, I'm an actor, I'm a writer, I'm a stand-up, and I'm a sketch comedy guy. And I was like, the idea of doing a one-person sketch every single day sounded utterly exhausting to me.
Yeah.
And so I was like, what's the easiest thing I could do and have it be refillable, have it be something that I'm going to be interested in, whether anybody wants to watch these videos or not. They attribute it to Bill Hicks. They say, that Bill said, even if you can't be funny on stage, at least be interesting. That was kind of the beginning of it. I was like, oh, I'm already collecting all of these videos. Why don't I just do that? Like talk about a different video every day, and then doing the, what's on this tape. I mean, that's my favorite thing, obviously after my friends and family. That's my favorite thing in the world.
Is it just because the thrill of the unknown? You don't know what you're going to find?
It's the thrill of the unknown. It's the treasure hunt. It's because it's funny. For me, I almost feel like nostalgia is a dirty word, because nostalgia means it's a longing to go back. Yeah. And that's not what I'm about. I'm interested in the ephemera of being able to take a glimpse into, a random night of television that shouldn't exist. We shouldn't be able to see this. It's as close as, I feel like we'll come to time traveling, of just this little peak. And it's such an exciting thing of, well, what is on this tape? What will, and it also gets me wondering, like, well, who was this person that taped this thing? Because once in a while you get somebody, they kind of absentmindedly, they forget they're recording something and they start flipping channels. So, you can kind of pick up. It's my favorite part of it is the detective work of what city was this recorded in? Because they're all over. I travel a lot doing stand-up. So I'll grab tapes here and there, but then also LA is a transplant city. So it's just like, where did all these tapes from Boston come from? Right. I don't know. I bought them in Studio City. So it's like this treasure hunt, this detective work of what city were they in? What year is it? What day is it? My favorite is a tape just goes in and they have recorded an entire 4, 5, 6 hours broadcast of a random television network. Yep. And some of them don't even exist anymore. I mean, you get the NBC, ABC affiliates, but then you get those off-brand UHF channels that, have all been gobbled up by like Sinclair or, MeTV or all that stuff. It's a riot. I love it. It is my favorite. Just like, it boils down to just pure curiosity. I'm like, well, what is on this tape? Because the label doesn't mean anything. I have found in my experience, it's like 9 times out of 10, the label is incorrect. Right. Truly.
Or what baffles me is like trying to decode what they say sometimes. Like, I don't know how the people that write it can even like read what they wrote.
It's incredible to me. Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy. My favorite thing whenever you pop it in is when like a live broadcast of some sort happens, whether that be like an SNL or you had the Oscars on. That was very, very nice. Or even just like a late show of some sort. I can't get enough of that stuff. Just seeing guests live and see how they react.
I know. I mean, people often ask, well, like, what's your holy grail? What are you after? And I'm like, I mean, I don't know. There's no one particular thing, but I'm always hoping to find an original broadcast of a Tonight Show starring Johnny Carson, or, like, it kind of dawned on me. I've got a lot of copies of Johnny Carson's final episode. the final episode of Cheers. I don't have a copy of the finale of MASH. And that is in such a sweet spot
Yeah,
of
when was that?
83, 82 or
It
83.
should be out there, yeah.
Yeah, people would have had VCRs and would have been. It's the most watched show ever,
Right.
you know,
The most
obviously
watched
outside of
season finale ever, right? Or series finale?
ever.
Yeah.
I mean, until certain Super Bowls, it
Yeah.
was the most watched television show in history. Yeah, so it's kind of odd that I haven't come across that. I mean, the amount of copies of like this one random Barbara Streisand special that was on Fox that I found, it's like, all right, a lot of moms out there, a lot of moms taping stuff. It is funny too. I found it feels like, because like I found a lot of stuff from the 90s on TNT, right? I have yet to find an episode of Monster Vision on TNT hosted by Joe Bob Briggs. So there is sometimes the stuff I find tends to be a little more, not to just, just in a very broad sense, a little more feminine, there maybe that there is something to the, I find you find a lot more Hallmark movies or Lifetime movies or soap operas,
Yeah.
Barbara Streisand, like I mentioned, whereas some of the more, I haven't found a ton of like action movies taped off TV or horror or, things a little more male centric. It's interesting. I'm like, is there kind of that, mentality of, men were always on the hunt and always taping over stuff and wearing out the tapes.
Yeah.
And like women taped something once and then put it on the shelf. I don't know. It's
I
a broad assumption, but there is something potentially to it.
Sure. I could see just like a lot of men either re-recording over stuff that they have, or it's still collected somewhere in their house, or they just threw it away. Like it's one of those two. Yeah. The female demographic definitely likes to like keep care of their stuff, and it looks nice. It's labeled. It might not be labeled correctly, but at least it was originally labeled somewhat.
It's like I taped it, I put it on the shelf. Whereas it might be more like, especially like guys in the 80s and 90s, just like, oh, I gotta find a tape. This thing just started, and then like trying to cut out the commercials and like Whereas it is there is a much more passive approach of just putting the tape and hitting record and walking away.
Sure.
But yeah, I mean, it is interesting.
I've been very nostalgic recently on, because I haven't had to do it in so long, the menu process of it all, like the cable, satellite, main menu, where like the thing you're viewing gets popped in like the corner of a window and you just go through the guide and try to look through channels. Do you ever see that taped on any of your tapes?
Yeah. I have a tape where somebody does sit on the preview channel for a while.
What do I want to watch?
And like up on the top, it's like, it's got this, circular series of ads that start to repeat themselves for, the upcoming WWF pay-per-view, or, this Christmas movie is going to be on Lifetime later. Once in a while, somebody will pop up they start flipping channels and they go to the guide. One person, and this was fairly recently, it was like some sort of like, I didn't know what this was. I suppose it was early Time Warner cable, but it was just like, it was like the Warner. It was really old looking, like what you picture, classic 80s public access of just like a blue screen with just that computer type across of.
Wow.
And I was like, damn, this is some vintage looking, like it felt so early on to even have a channel guide on one of the channels.
Right.
But yeah, it said on the top like Warner Cable, and I was like, damn, this is ancient looking.
That's great. Yeah.
Yeah.
Growing up, our backyard had one of the huge giant satellite dishes, like ones you would find at TV stations. Yeah. So we were able to have like I remember I'm a late 80s, early 90s kid. That's when I kind of grew up. And I remember flipping through satellite and stuff. Like it would take a lot longer to actually like click on a channel and it actually like show up. But it was still kind of cool to have that guide. And really, the only time I use a guide now is like when I go to hotels, just because like I don't know what channel things are on in this city I've never been to before.
Now, was there like was there ever like a need to reposition the satellite dish? Was that something like your parents had to go out there and do, or?
They've only had to do it once, and it was when like the tree got too big and it just kind of blocked the signal. So they had to move it a good like 45 degrees. And I remember my dad not being a happy camper having to do that.
Wow.
Because the thing literally is like 20 feet tall. It's huge.
You know what's funny is there's a clip that's on YouTube, or at least it was. It's funny how much YouTube has changed.
Mm-hmm.
And it's Johnny Carson and Ed McMahon doing in-show promos, you know, because they used to do commercials at the desk. Like they would throw to, obviously, you know, pre-filmed ads, just like any commercial break on any TV show.
Mm-hmm.
But this was still a holdover in the 70s of like, you know, and tonight's show is brought to you by LaCroix. LaCroix is, and then talking right to the camera, selling the item. And this was outtakes. This was just B-roll, but and they're being kind of crass about it. Like Johnny even says, like, you know, he says something, you know, excuse me for, you know, telling the joke as it is, but he says something about like, you know, or what if they sold a douche that was called Cuntaway? And it's like, it's startling seeing, you know, America's, Johnny,
Yeah.
you know, we used to tuck everybody in at night, you know, being as crass as that. But the reason that it exists is because this was done at a time when the Tonight Show was filmed in Burbank, and then they used to send the signal via satellite to New York, and then in New York is where they would edit it.
Mm-hmm.
And apparently what wound up happening was people with giant satellite dishes were catching the broadcast and videotaping it.
That's awesome.
And so getting this raw, unedited, you know, and swearing Johnny Carson, and apparently he got word of it and was furious that people were able to see, you know, him with his guard down, which you know, he's a very guarded guy.
Mm-hmm.
It's incredible that could even happen. You know, I mean, the closest I have to it is like when I worked at WWE, you know, I was a writer there for a number of years.
Mm-hmm.
I do have just random, I think they called them SAT copies, you know, or SAT returns, meaning the satellite copy of, it's an unedited SmackDown. SmackDown's live now, but it used to be, we would do Raw live on Monday, and then we would tape SmackDown on Tuesday, and then air an edit of it on Friday, air an edited version of SmackDown on Friday.
Yeah.
And once in a while, we would have to do things over, or somebody would flub something, or an angle wouldn't work, and Vince would be like, "Oh, God, so wrestling, forget it." And it wouldn't wind up airing. So I do have some stuff that, you know, I just, when I cleaned out my desk, I still had some DVDs, and I was like, oh, God, I wonder if there's any, you know, stuff that was cut from the air copy of SmackDown.
I'm surprised you haven't checked that out yet. That seems like right up your alley. What is that? What was on here again?
I know. Well, there's so much to go through. I mean, I have so much wrestling that it's like, there is like, you know, I do have a positive attitude about, like, some people are like, you've got more stuff there than you'll ever be able to watch. And I'm like, crunch the numbers. This would, like, even if I watched one thing every single day, I'm like, it would take 3 years. Big deal, you know? But again, I'm not including the wrestling. The wrestling is an untamed beast.
Well, it's one of those things to where, like, you've been a fan for so long. It's nice to know that there might be matches in your collection that you haven't seen. So it's just like, one of my favorite things to do is just like get a movie that's a blind watch for me, and hopefully I fall in love with it just like I did in the rental store. Like I still have that feeling deep inside now.
100%. Part of, for me, the reason to have a big collection is I like browsing. You know, like as far as nostalgia goes, I miss the experience of walking around in a video store and just looking for something.
Mm-hmm.
So being able to do that in my home, being like, oh God, I would say I couldn't quantify it, but I mean, certainly at this point, maybe the majority of my collection. I don't know. It's tough to say if I've watched more than I haven't watched in the collection,
Hmm.
but there's a huge chunk. It might not be, I couldn't quantify it, but I enjoy being able to like walk around being like, oh yeah, I do want to watch that. Like, oh
Mm-hmm.
yeah. Oh,
Yeah, you have the CLV or CL Z.
CLZ,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's it. I have the My Movies app, and
Okay.
I am able to catalog. When I started cataloging, there was an option to do, have you watched this movie or have you not? So sometimes when I'm just in the mood to watch something new, I just click, okay, I haven't watched any of these movies. And right now it's at like a 65-35 split. 65 I've seen, 35 I haven't.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of nice just to, whether it be looking in the collection or like scrolling through my phone, like, because it just shows all the titles, just all the box art on there. Like, okay, which one have I not seen? That's kind of fun to do as well.
Like I'd say, like the laser discs. I have like a bookcase here full of laser discs, and it's really like I bought some here and there at usually Amoeba Records, or once in a while you'll find like a Goodwill. They're just stuck in with the records.
Mm-hmm.
But my buddy Jerry, who owns the next record store in Santa Rosa, California, he would buy collections, and then Laserdiscs would come in, and he's just like, there is nothing I can do with these. So he would just send them to me and be like, at least they're getting a good home. So for sure, the majority of the Laserdiscs have not been watched by me at all.
Yeah.
But I'd say the thing that I'm most ferocious about is the 4Ks, because I'm so taken with how good they look and they sound that like once one comes in, I'm just like, oh, I can't wait to throw this in.
Correct.
But yeah,
I have my handful of like best 4K transfers I've seen. Do you have any that like stick in your head?
the one I always recommend to people, and I always preface it by saying, look, I don't like this movie, but the 4K of Flashdance is phenomenal.
Okay.
It is, because it's one of those music video movies.
Mm-hmm.
It's also shot by it's Adrian Lin, so it's like, okay, there's something going on in this film. But the combination of music and, of course, anything shot on film, anything pre-digital era,
sure,
is gonna look phenomenal on 4K. And Flashdance is one of those movies where I'm like, as soon as it starts, and like What a Feeling starts coming through, and of course you got to have the sound bar, you've got to have the subwoofer, you need to have the proper setup. That was one of my favorite. As soon as it started up, I was like, oh, this is beautiful. A lot of Westerns, because anything with outdoor shots looks pretty phenomenal. It took a minute for them to issue more prints of it, because Lawrence of Arabia was sitting on eBay and Amazon for like $200 for a minute. It seemed like the only 4K of it available was from that first Columbia box set.
Oh, there was a steelbook of it too that just is extremely expensive. Yeah.
They finally struck more copies of it, so you can get it for like, an actual reasonable price.
Mm-hmm.
When I put that in, legit, like no exaggeration, my mouth was hanging open with how gorgeous that thing looked. And it's still not as big as it should be.
Right.
Like I'm still waiting. Once in a while, they do 70mm marathons or festivals here in LA. And I missed the one year that Lawrence of Arabia was being shown on like a proper huge screen. And in that same vein, Oppenheimer, putting that on the 4K, I was like, holy crap, is this good?
Yep.
Man. And that's another one. I got lucky living in LA. I got to go to one of the the real actual IMAX theaters with a
I
proper
wish.
projector.
Right.
Yeah, really see a
Only a handful
70
of those.
millimeter
Mhm.
presentation of it. It was phenomenal. It was absolutely phenomenal, that movie.
I wish we had an IMAX with the projector, but it was like in like a science center, so it had like a fucking
Mhm.
dome on it. No way to watch a movie. I still remember watching Spider-Man 3 in that dome because it was the biggest thing. It was the biggest screen we had in our town, and
Uh-huh.
it was just you were looking up, and there was so much like blurry action going on. You had no idea what the fuck was happening because I was like way up front too. Not a fun experience,
Oh.
but not a fun movie either.
You know what's funny is we went to see we go to the movies a lot, and we've really tried to instill it into my son. He's 8.5, of like, going to the movie theater is an important thing to do.
Yes.
It's not just something fun. It's important. It's an
Mhm.
important part of our culture. And so every family movie we wind up going to, and some are better than others. And my wife and I have an understanding if something is really the dregs, we'll take turns taking a break, just kind of wandering around the theater, maybe ducking into other movies. And I forget what we were watching, and I took a lap around the movie theater and at the Cineplex and was just popping into different theaters. And I went into a showing of Oppenheimer on just a regular screen, not an
Mhm.
IMAX.
Sure.
And I was like blown away by how shitty it was because there were there are changes in that film from black and white to color. There's different changes of like the shape of the screen. Sometimes it's 4:3, sometimes it's the 16:9. I mean,
Yeah.
and there were times where I'm like, this is the wrong framing. These people aren't seeing the same movie that I saw. They don't see, like, it was jumping from scene to scene, and I was like, I know that this is not how this is supposed to look.
And it sucks
And
the
it's still,
projectionists don't care either. That's the sad
yeah.
part. Yeah.
Yeah, it was wild. It was sad. I was like, wow, these people, it's like somebody I saw on Facebook was like, I'm just gonna go ahead and say it, Godzilla -1. It wasn't that great. And I'm like, did you watch it on TV or did you watch it in the theater? And he's like, on
Mhm.
TV. And I'm just like, yeah, well, that's your fucking problem. You're sitting there, the dog's probably running by, you're probably looking at your fucking phone,
Mhm.
you're probably like your mind. There's something about uh um Macbeth. We saw the Joel Cohen Macbeth with
Yeah.
Denzel
The
Washington in
tragedy
the
of Macbeth.
theater.
Yeah. Mhm.
Holy shit, is that a good movie?
Hmm.
And literally everybody I know that watched it on Apple TV was like, it was a snooze. And I'm like, that's your problem.
There's too many
You needed to,
distractions at home. Yeah. Mhm.
homie, there was almost too many distractions in the theater. Like at one point, I bent down to like get more popcorn, and I realized I'm like, oh, I'm for like that split second, I'm like, oh, I almost lost track of what's happening because it's Shakespeare.
Mhm.
So it's like if you're not locked in on every single syllable they're saying, it's so easy to get lost. So it was like that film was meant to be seen in a pitch black room with only that image in front of you.
Sure.
And it was phenomenal. Denzel was killer in that. Oh man.
When I was in New Orleans last year, I was able to see The Killer and The Killers of the Flower Moon, a double feature in theaters. And that was amazing. I think not enough people talked about The Killer when it came out. I think that movie is extraordinary. And I think a
Yeah.
good chunk of that reason is because I saw it in theaters. Just watching that on Netflix, it just doesn't hit the same. It really doesn't.
I believe it. I believe it.
So when you go to, I didn't even think we'd talk about movies and movie theaters. I would say I go to a handful a month, and I would say more often than not, I see a cell phone light, and it drives me so nuts. And if it's out longer than 30 seconds, I'm the asshole that yells like, "Put it away!" And then they get too scared or nervous to put it away or to put it back out again because more often than not, they're just teenagers bored. Bored of the
Yeah,
movie. Drives me absolutely nuts.
It's a shame. I think especially coming out of the pandemic, people lost their damn minds, and you know, I mean, I remember being at what did we see? I feel like I might have been with my son. Anyway, it's not important. Well, I got up at one point to go use the restroom, and a dude, and of course it's like the reclining chairs with your feet up. This lunatic had not just taken off his shoes. This guy took off his socks and was sitting there barefooted. And I'm like, you're out of your mind. I mean, we went to see Challengers, and there was a dude. There's no spoilers here, but at one point, I forget the actors' names in that movie. Not Zendaya. I mean the two male leads. And they're tennis players. They're tennis pros, and one is helping the other one stretch out his legs. And dude sitting behind us, packed theater, opening night, in one of the handicapped chairs, not handicapped, yells out, "Gay!" And I'm just like, oh no, this is not happening.
Yeah.
And had already been saying stuff like, because that movie opens with like Zendaya walking by the camera just in her underwear, and the guy's just like, oh yeah, and it's like, buddy, we get it, you're so straight, everybody is so convinced. So then my wife is like you, she's like, Glennis doesn't play, my girl runs hot, it's amazing, I love her. She pops up, she's like, I'm getting that security guard, I'm getting that guy thrown out of here. And I'm like, all right, I don't feel like fighting somebody in the parking lot in 2 hours, but we'll see how this goes.
Yeah.
As she's getting up, she sees the dude is vaping in the theater.
What a tool.
And it was fate. It was meant to be. As she's walking, the security guard just happened to be doing his rounds, was walking. It was already in the theater, walking up the ramp. And she's like, yeah, that guy's vaping. And he goes, what? What guy? And the security guard was psyched, because if I was a security guard, I would be dying to throw somebody out of the theater. And he comes around the corner. He's just like, you're gone. What? I didn't do nothing. I wasn't doing nothing. Bye-bye.
Yeah. I have a friend who's a cop, and just for extra hours, they do like movie theater duty. And she loves doing it because it's the easiest job there is, because nothing ever happens at a movie theater. But somebody has to be there because there have been a couple incidences.
Right. Sure.
Yeah. Yes, that dude was probably like, okay, it's been 3 months of me working here, and I finally get to do something proactive. Let's do it. Got excited. Very good. Since you live in Hollywood, do you think where did you grow up? Was it?
I grew up in Rhode Island, yeah.
Okay.
I grew up in Rhode Island. I lived in New York City for about 15 years, and then I've been here in LA for, 11 or 12 years.
So I guess we could do LA versus New York, or just anywhere you've seen a movie. Is watching a movie in LA, does it just hit different as opposed to other markets just because crowds are better?
I would say some of them are better, some of them are smarter. I would say that, like, for instance, at the New Beverly Cinema, which is one of the theaters that Tarantino owns.
Yeah. Yep.
You find a little bit of a hipper crowd, but then there's what I'll call, like, there is some performative laughter that happens where it's like almost like, the same thing with the guy just being like, I'm totally straight, you guys. This is really gay. It's the same thing of like, I get that joke. I understand that reference. That type of thing.
Sure.
But, like when we saw Don't Worry, Darling opening night, it felt like a midnight movie. People were laughing like out loud, just savagely enjoying how bad that movie was. Or it's different. But I mean, like, New York was, it depended. I mean, especially when I was in New York, there were so many of the single screen theaters still around. The art house theaters were still around.
Nice.
And I saw movies at really all of them. Like any movie theater that like would pop up in like a Woody Allen movie, I saw something, and especially like just matinees during the day, just old movies running during the day. I caught a lot of those at like the Film Forum, or I remember I went to the MoMA one Saturday morning for a screening of Eraserhead. Packed theater, and I almost not ran, but like definitely walked quickly to the very front row. And I remember this random woman who sat down next to me was just like, "Is this where the real fans sit, in the front?" And I was like, "I don't want to talk to you." And that experience, watching Eraserhead with a bunch of diehard fans on a Saturday morning at the Museum of Modern Art,
Mm-hmm.
that was the first time I was like, "Oh, this movie's a comedy. This is a riotously funny film."
Hmm.
Because I remember the first time I watched it, I was like, I felt like I was inside someone's nightmare.
Sure.
But that experience was like, oh, this is the communal experience of going to a movie that, this is what keeps me coming back.
Are you a big front of the movie theater fan when you go? I can't stand. I think that's way too close.
It depends. I mean, obviously not if it's an IMAX, but my brain got broken when I was small. My brother took me to see Return of the Jedi when I was, like 4, and we sat in the very front row, and it was damn near the biggest thing I'd ever seen in my life. And he's like leaning, like I said, he's like 9 years older than me, so he's 13 or 14, and he's leaning over reading the subtitles every time Jabba the Hutt talked. And I just remember being blown away by that. And so if I'm flying solo, I'll go sit in the front. Certainly at the New Beverly, that's such a smaller screen. It's actually
There's enough
the
space
most
between.
beneficial place, to sit in the front.
Mhm.
But I just recently took my son to see the new Planet of the Apes, and we sat in the front, and he's like, "Oh no, this isn't good." I'm like, no, that's mom. Mom doesn't like sitting in the front. We're gonna have a great time. And he had a great time sitting in the front, because
Nice.
it was just like,
Yeah.
whoa.
Yeah, my kid's the type of person who will like stand 2 inches away from the TV and just like stare like this, just like getting ready to land. So I need to
Yeah.
take her to the front row sometime. It's always a mixed bag for me. Just depends on the theater, depends on the movie. Like I still remember seeing Shape of Water. It was a packed theater, which is never happens in Iowa anymore. But like we had to go to the front row, and that movie is just so atmospheric, and it moves slow enough to where you're just like, yeah, I'm just getting soaked in, and this is a great experience.
Yeah, because I mean, obviously, like an IMAX, or if there's if somebody ever, please, if anybody listening will buy the Cinerama and reopen that movie theater, please. But like an IMAX, you do want to be a little further back and in the middle, so you can like see the whole thing.
Correct.
But I remember when I was in New York when Titanic came out, again, obviously packed theater, sold out shows. So it was like, and before they had assigned seating. So you're like, you got to try, where's their seat? That was a situation where we were a little too close, but it was wild, like kind of like turning your head and looking, almost like watching a tennis match.
Very cool. Let's see here. Talking a little bit about Hollywood. You have been in multiple movies and TV shows. How did that kind of start going about? And do you have any like very good experiences on set? Because you've been in quite a bit of like TV shows and movies that I have thoroughly enjoyed.
Yeah, I mean, everything that I have came from doing stand up. Summer 2003, I just started doing open mics, and it has always just been a slow snowball, leading to other things ever since then. So one thing led to another. Like, you meet other comics, they're like, "Oh, you should come do this show," or like, "Oh, there's a casting person in the crowd," or there's the booker for something else is in the crowd, or hey, they want to see people at this audition they've never seen before. Then I wind up booking something. Then I wind up getting an agent, and then a lot of commercials, a lot of TV shows, a lot of movies. I mean, and each experience is different. At at the core, I am a working class actor, and a lot of commercials, Sometimes you get treated like just another prop in front of the camera. I remember when we worked on the Pete Holmes show, I mentioned something offhand about, I'm like, well, talent gets treated like shit. And this one woman who like booked talent on the show was like, what are you talking about? Talent gets treated amazing. I go, oh, no. You deal with A-list talent. I'm talking about being a gun in the trenches.
Right.
You know, we get treated like I had an air conditioner almost fell on me and almost killed me in a commercial once. And I just happened to, like, I was like, I need a break. I just need to stand up off this couch. And like a second after I stood up, an air conditioner fell onto the spot and I was like, okay, now I need to go smoke a cigarette because I'm shook up.
You're almost the Mista lady. Yeah. Jesus.
Oh my God. Get this crazy thing off of me. But like movies, TV shows, it's like that's a little bit more of the, oh, that chair's for me. I can sit in that chair. Nobody else is going to sit. Oh, I can just go to the front of the line to get food. I don't have to wait behind everybody else. Okay. You know, you can almost see it's like, oh yeah, this is why. I mean, look, I know a lot of people when they started out who now are like crazy famous.
Mm-hmm.
And the ones who are assholes now, they were assholes back then,
right.
You know, but you can see how being treated with, you know, kid gloves can change a person, you know? And I'm sure there was only a few brief periods where like, and it was just from like commercials that ran all the time that like people recognized me on the street. And I was like, oh yeah, I can see why people don't like this. This is uncomfortable. You know, because it's one thing sitting on the subway and just feeling paranoid. Like, I feel like everybody's staring at me.
Mm-hmm.
But it's another thing when you're like, no, everybody is staring at me. This is awkward. And I'm like, I'm not getting paid enough money to put up with this. But I don't know, like I was in The Other Guys. So I did scenes with Will Ferrell, with Mark Wahlberg. They couldn't have been more different. I mean, Will Ferrell was so like friendly and nice and just was like, came up to me between takes and was just like, hey, you know, you're so funny. I'm like, what? You're so funny. What, are you kidding me? You know, oh my God, I miss the Conan late night show.
Me
not
too.
just as a performer, but as a viewer.
Yes.
But I got to get pulled in almost like once a month. I mean, it was crazy how often I got called in to perform in sketches, either pre-tapes or, you know, once they saw like, oh, this guy can do it, like
Mm-hmm.
performing live in front of the audience with Conan and Andy. And that was the greatest treat for me, was just sitting in the dress rehearsal and watching Andy and Conan run through sketches and jokes and, you know, edit things or cut things or just, you know, speak in a way that they wouldn't want a satellite dish in a backyard to pick up, you know. It was a treat. It was such a treat to be behind that curtain. As a matter of fact, my favorite story from Conan was I did a sketch and I came back through the curtain, and the guests that night were Eric Idle and John Cleese.
Oh.
And they were walking up to the curtain through the stage because they were in the next segment.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm walking back and I see John Cleese and I just go, excuse me, Mr. Cleese, it's great to meet you. I'm a huge fan, and, you know, just wanted to say hello. And he goes, oh, very nice to meet you. Yes. And then I go to Eric Idle and he talked first. He goes, oh, you were so funny. You are so funny. And I'm like, put me in a box, bury me now. Yeah. Eric Idle just told me I'm funny. I'm done. What more do you want? You know?
That and Will Ferrell, man. 1-2 combo.
Oh, forget.
Yeah.
I mean, Adam Sandler told me I was funny. Like, I did a sketch with Conan. I came in the back, and it's funny. Like earlier that afternoon, there were a couple dressing rooms in that green room, for talent. Like Andy had his room, Conan had his room, and then there were a couple of empty dressing rooms, and one was larger that typically musical guests, bands would be in there.
Sure.
And there was a shower in that one. And the only time I took a shower in it once, just because I was covered in makeup. Like they made it look like I was sunburned. I'd been at Coachella or something. And so I went in there and was like scrubbing off all this stuff. The only other person I ever saw once take a shower, I didn't watch him take a shower, but I knew he was using the facilities, was Adam Sandler. And he had the door open. He seems like the only person who has become absolutely mega famous and rich who is completely unaffected by it and is the same guy he's always been. Because the door was open. I saw him, like, he comes out, he's just talking to his manager. He's got his towel on. He's just like, yeah, I don't know. I mean, we'll figure it out. Then his manager's like, oh, fuck, we should close this door.
Oh, God.
But then afterwards, he grabbed me and he's just like, oh, my God, you're so funny. That was great. That was great. Oh, man. And I'm like standing there like, put me in one of your movies. Put me in all of your movies.
Yeah.
Let's see how funny you
one
think
of your
I am.
friends.
Yeah.
You're good with your friends.
Like, I'm really funny. I'm available. This is my phone number and this is my email. But yeah.
Jeez, that's great. Well, not only have you been in a lot of like movies and TV shows, you've been in a lot of like content creation for the longest time. Like on YouTube, you're with the whole College Humor gang every now and again. I doing just some research before this. You have a video on YouTube that has like 10 million views. How crazy is that? And how has like content creation changed in like the beginning of YouTube to like the content creation social media bubble that it is now?
It's crazy. It really is crazy. I was just saying to somebody earlier today of just like, I guess this is just part of getting old. You just see things change.
Yeah.
Because like when we first did, I mean, just the fact of like College Humor basically not existing anymore, you know.
Yeah. When it was a phenomenon.
My God. And then like the people that came along trying to do what they did, you know, like Super Deluxe or, you know, the most obvious one is Funny or Die. And then those things vanished too. And, you know, I mean, what's still around with College Humor, it's not what it once was. They, you know, they lost their corporate money. And because I mean, like the productions that group, that website used to crank out was incredible. It was absolutely such a phenom that it was like, it's wild to even look back and realize how much we all took it for granted.
Sure.
And again, it was one of those things where like when we meaning me, Pete Holmes, and Oren Brimmer, started making videos together, it was like, well, Oren has a camera. Oren has a computer with editing software. You know, me and Pete, we know how to write funny sketches. Oren's a funny guy too. Oren knows how to edit together a sketch and shoot it. He knows about lighting. And like, suddenly we're, instead of just, you know, I mean, this is a phenomenon of like 20 years ago, people would have conversations like, you know, it'd be a funny video is if X, Y, and Z happened. You know, the idea that all of those things are just in this phone right now,
right,
is wild. And when we came up with the idea of the Batman video, we were like, yeah, but we want it to look good, and we need a really good looking Batman suit, and like it'd be better if we're on a roof and if we shot at night. And then one of us was like, wait, what if we just pitch this idea to College Humor, have them pay for it, and then that should work. And then when we did it, it went crazy viral, you know. And then those Batman videos, it was like us and Jake and Amir were the most viewed things on the website. And when we started doing those Batman videos, I mean, it was like Instagram wasn't even a thing. You know, I mean, it's like it's crazy to think of, you know, like what, like Bo Burnham talks about it quite a bit, where he's like, what he did on YouTube, you just couldn't do it now. You could not get that kind of.
There's just too much.
There's too much, and like you go to that front page of YouTube, and it's all, you know, the Jimmy Fallon Tonight Show, and you know, a Mountain Dew sponsorship, and you know, Rogan and this podcast and that podcast, and it's just like, you know, this is it's there's no, the little guy has no. I mean, that's what YouTube was. It was just, it's us making our thing.
Yep.
That's what I love so much about TikTok, because it's the best I've ever performed on any social media platform, because that algorithm they have of being able to feed you. I always describe the TikTok algorithm to people as the episode of The Simpsons where Homer goes to hell and they feed him all the donuts in the world.
You
know, once TikTok knows what you're into, they are going to strap you to a chair and feed it to you until you explode.
Yep.
And being able to be, because it's like Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, it becomes a echo chamber. And especially like the Instagram or Twitter, it's like I see the same 5 people and the same 5 people see me.
Sure.
Whereas TikTok, I'm like, I've got over 230,000 followers now, and it's mostly strangers. You know, it's just being put in front of people, which is like such a delight to actually be able to be exposed to the masses, you know.
Correct.
And I find that it's pretty close to, you know, it's almost like stand-up comedy in a way, because like with stand-up, it's like, if you're not getting laughs, the audience isn't going to stick with you. And so the algorithm of, like, you see a lot of big creators who are like either big on Vine or big on YouTube or Instagram. When they transition onto TikTok, they're like, I've got, you know, 1 million followers. Each video should have 1 million views. Why aren't you showing my views to my followers? And it's like the For You page is very meritorious. It's like they send out your video to a circle of people, and if they are meeting all the criteria of, you know, engaging, liking, commenting, watching it all the way to the end, then the circle gets a little wider of sending it out. And it's like, if you're not getting the views, it's because people aren't engaging with the video.
Sure.
As opposed to YouTube, where it's like, you know, the constant suggestions, or even like something as more manufactured as like Netflix. Like when Netflix is like, oh, this is the biggest, you know, the most views of this movie in the history of Netflix. It's like, probably because as soon as a movie or show ends, you just automatically start playing it.
Correct. And the person isn't even watching. It's just on. Yeah. It's white noise at this point.
They're asleep, you know? Yeah. Right. But at any rate, it's crazy to see how much things have changed. And like, you know, even when we started doing Batman videos again last year, it was like, okay, we're going to try to monetize this on YouTube. And it's like, the fact that Pete has the amount of followers that he does on his YouTube page, it's like, you couldn't buy that now. You know, you couldn't buy that level of an audience.
Correct. Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, it's quite something. It's really striking how much it's all changed. And, you know, because as the playing field gets wider, you know, it also, the talent level gets thinner, whereas it's like everybody is putting out some sort of content.
Everybody is a player, especially on TikTok. It's easy enough to do. Like, my dad is so illiterate with anything electronic wise, and he has made a couple TikToks. That's when you know it's like getting somewhere. And they're hilarious because it's just like old man like trying to figure stuff out, the most basic of editing. And yeah, it's very, very fun to watch. But I mean, even when I started TikTok 3 years ago, I feel like the app has changed. Like there's a lot more TikTok shop things. There's a lot more lives that pop up when you scroll. It's like, it's not the death scroll that it used to be. Like maybe you have to like flip through like 3-4 times just to get rid of all the fluff to get to the content that you want. I feel like that's only going to get worse too, unfortunately.
And it's funny too how it's so thirsty seeing YouTube and Instagram and Facebook, really. But I mean, what's the difference between Facebook and Instagram? Trying to be TikTok with reels and shorts.
Yeah.
Like you go to post something on Instagram, the first suggestion, they're like, "Oh, do you want to do a reel? You want to do a reel? You want to do a couple reels? We could do a reel.
You can make these photos into reels if you want.
You want to do a reel? You want to make these photos a reel? Like, no, I want to do a story. Oh, okay. Then I don't know how to help you with that.
Mm-hmm. You figure it out.
Oh, okay. I mean, even Twitter now has like, which is devastating. Like, because with TikTok, it's about the views,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and then you got the likes, and then you got the comments, and you got the shares. With Twitter, it's like, here's how many people viewed this tweet. It's like, great, 2 people liked it. That used to be the quantifier here.
Or God, Threads. Threads is just pathetic.
Threads.
My God.
Threads. It's like Twitter, just owned by a different evil rich guy.
Yep. I can't stand. I've never been a big Twitter person, but I know people love it, and that's how some people communicate with one another. It's just never been my thing. I've been a visual guy, and I know that there's like pictures and stuff now. When I started Twitter, it was all words. You just had like the 160 characters, and that was it.
Yeah, Twitter. I just missed that wave, and it was like, especially guys that I was coming up with in comedy, like starting to blow up. Like, oh my God, you've got how many followers on Twitter now? And like all around, like Instagram, Twitter. I don't know about YouTube. It's never treated me very well, but like just always kind of leveled out at about like 10,000 followers, which is like, you know, I was like, oh man, this is amazing. I remember the day on TikTok when I hit 50,000 followers,
Mhm.
and I was just like, you've got to be shitting me. This is crazy.
Yeah.
This is crazy. And I'm still marching along like it's been very slow going and just organic, just like real, you know, boots on the ground. Like, here's what I do. Come on in for the ride. And it's pretty. I really hope that thing doesn't get banned, man, because it's just like
I put less of a focus on that app just because I'm nervous it's going to go away this time next year, and I don't want to put all my eggs in just that basket because I'm nervous that basket's going to have a hole in it real quick.
I mean, the one thing that I'm not gonna like with Vine, I'm like, man, I wish I downloaded all those videos I did because they weren't great, but I would just like to have them.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And the fact that they don't exist anymore. I mean, the one thing I really wish is and when Vines pop up on TikTok, it's like, God, they are so funny. But the tragedy for me is my dear friend Patrick Walsh, who showrunner, brilliant writer, co-host of the We'll See You in Hell podcast. His Vines, I suggest anybody. I think that there's one like super cut of some of his best Vines on YouTube somewhere, but Pat Walsh, and it's not enough. What's collected is great, but it's not enough. He was so perfect on that app, and people keep saying to him like, well, you should do TikTok. You should, you know, and he's on and he'll watch videos, but he's just not interested in posting videos of himself anymore. But
there's something about just like capturing anything in 6 seconds and like becoming a master at that. That app was great. I miss it. It was good stuff.
I mean, the one that I quote all the time is he's like, we've all heard the expression "shit or get off the pot," but what if there was a third option? Hi, welcome to a really weird TED Talk, and that's the type of vibes he did. We're all gonna die anyway.
Yes. Okay. Let's see here. I have a couple of questions. There's a viewer that watches that always throws the same like 2 or 3 in here, so I'll throw them up for you really quick. On Letterboxd, there's a big thing. 4 favorite films.
Sure.
Do you have those off the top of your head?
I do. I mean, I know what they are on Letterboxd, and these are pretty set in stone. The Blues Brothers is always number 1. I'd say after that, it's debatable, but I'll go Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, Evil Dead 2, and Simple Men, the Hal Hartley movie. I mean, bobbing in and out is always going to be like Brazil, 2001: A Space Odyssey. honestly, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood has just become like my absolute favorite Tarantino movie, and it's like it's something that I keep going back to.
Do you think it's because you live out there and it's kind of nice seeing like how it once was, or because I keep on hearing that like, oh, that Tarantino movie is just growing on me. I've only seen it
Yeah.
a couple of times. I feel like I need to watch it again.
I mean, I just love those characters. I mean, I definitely love like digging on LA in the late 60s,
Hmm.
but more than anything, it's those two, it's Cliff and Rick and that relationship and just the way that they speak to each other. And then I mean, honestly, there is something to being an actor and watching him, Rick Dalton, the Leonardo DiCaprio character, you know, trying to remember his lines, and then like he gets one thing wrong and then the whole thing falls apart and then he just beats himself up. It's such a great movie. I just you don't get enough movies these days where you feel like you're just hanging out with the characters.
Sure.
I think studios and networks and suits note things to death, and they're like, what are the stakes here? What are the stakes? Who are we rooting for? What there's really nobody to root for in this scene. And I'm just like, I just want to hang out with these people.
Hmm.
It's like the Breakfast Club.
Sure. Right.
What's great about that movie is you feel like you're just sitting in detention with them, and you're like, oh my god, I'm hanging out with these cool kids.
Right. Man, the Before trilogy, I just watched that last year. That's just like watching a couple evolve, and I was just totally encapsulated with that. I could not get enough of it. I watched the whole thing in one sitting. It was great.
Yeah, there was a horror movie. I don't know how to pronounce it because they never really say the word in the film, but Kino just put out a Blu-ray of it. Is it even a 4K? But it's called like the Boogans. Boogens, I think.
That's the only time I've ever heard of that movie. Yes, is when Kino released it. Hmm.
I like the monster's pretty cool when it finally shows up, but like most of the movie, you're just hanging out with these two couples. And I'm like, and there's also like like a B character. There's a dog, and there's some funny scenes with the dog and how smart the dog is.
Hmm.
But I'm like, most of this movie, you're just hanging out with these two dudes and these two chicks, and I'm like, I dig on this. That was the appeal of most horror movies, good horror movies, like Friday the 13th, the final chapter. It's like just hanging out at this party or at this camp with these kids is like enough. And now we're gonna have some cool thrills and some gnarly kills. But I need to. That's the thing that lacks in most movies that don't hit these days is I need to just want to be able to spend like the show Secession. My wife loves that show, and she's always on me about, you got to watch this show. And I'm like, and I've watched a couple episodes, and I'm like, look, I cannot deny it. These are top actors killing it at the top of their game. This is well written, witty, biting dialogue, sharp. The way it's filmed, the photography, the direction, everything is hitting. I don't want to spend time with those people. That's the difference. Is I'm like, I don't like. I worked at WWE. I don't want to spend my Sunday night hanging out with the McMahons.
Oh geez, there was another, speaking of like hangout movies and boutique labels, from Unearthed Films, which is like a label where like, oh god,
yeah, it's like, what's this going to be?
Going to happen now? Yeah, I'm really going to hate myself. There's a movie called Christmas Cruelty. And did you not like that movie?
I don't dig on Christmas horror. It just, I can't.
See, the first 10 minutes, holy God. And the last 10 minutes, the same thing. But like the middle hour is just like these three roommates hanging out. It's the most bizarre vibe. And I kind of just keep on thinking back to that movie just because like this just seems like a movie that is so unique in the horror genre because not a lot happens in the middle.
Well, I'll tell you. Did you see Blue Beetle?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I would love nothing more, and they should do this on Max. I was like, get rid of all this superhero shit. I just want a movie with that family.
Sure.
You know, like George Lopez I was howling at how funny his performance was. When they steal his truck and he spins around and collapses and faints, I was done for. But I get what you mean. But yeah, with Christmas Cruelty, I was just like, oh, I can't do Christmas horror.
I'm always looking for a new Christmas movie to watch, and horror is just the genre where I'm like, these don't make sense, and I'll give it a shot anyway. Yeah, that just popped into my mind. Speaking of boutique talk, we haven't even talked boutique labels. Do you have a specific one that you like over any other?
That's a great question. I mean, Kino probably hits it out of the park the most because Criterion is too up their own ass. They do great transfers and they do terrific, supplemental material, but lots of the times I'm just like, this movie's fucking boring. I'm sorry, I'm trying to be, cultured or well versed or well read or whatever, but I'm just like all right. They got some bangers. Don't get me wrong.
Take a college class. Like every time I pop in a Criterion, it's like I got to be in the right mood to watch this.
Sure, no doubt.
Yeah.
With Kino, they have those, important films, but then they also have the Boogans or just Franco movies or just like late 60s World War II movies.
Right.
It's a more honest depiction of motion pictures as opposed to just being like film is art. I'm like, no, it's not. It's a commercial art. So above anything else, they had to get a bunch of money to make this movie, and they have to get a bunch of asses in seats to make their money back and hopefully make a profit.
Right.
It's not, you can't just, it's like there are Jim Jarmusch movies that I really like, and then there are Jim Jarmusch movies where I'm like, dude, fuck off, Kino does it right, and I think they do it the best. I mean, as far as packaging and supplemental stuff, I think Arrow kills it because especially with the 4Ks, you're always going to have like the little postcard size lobby cards. You're going to have a poster, like a great little supplemental like book to flip through.
Yep.
And then I mean ones that aren't like such big phenomenons like those two. Radiance does a great job with their Blu-rays.
That also feels more like a Criterion to me, like a little bit like just like foreign language Criterion almost. A lot of their stuff is just like
a lot of foreign stuff, a lot of really interesting stuff. Like I just watched a Blu-ray they put out called The Bad Mother from 1993, I think, which I was like, wow, this is very unique, this movie. And like funny and gut-wrenching, and there's like irony to it, and it was just like, 88 Films does a great job, mostly martial arts stuff.
Yep.
I mean, the one that I'm struggling to think of is called I mean, there's Classic Flicks, which does like a lot of like old stuff, silent stuff. But then hold on, I just want to get the name of this one right.
Sure. Ooh, look at you walking around with the mic. Very professional.
Flicker Alley. Flicker Alley does a lot of noir and silent movies and like restoring a lot of movies. Like a lot of the stuff they put out is like was either considered lost or they found a print or they reassembled a print. And you get a lot of like UCLA involved in some of their stuff that they put out, that like they found a 16 millimeter print of something and they pieced it together and cleaned it up. I'd say that those are the ones for sure that certainly jump out at me, and also the sub label that Kino just started, the Kino Cult.
Yeah,
I've really enjoyed every single one of those that they've put out.
Nice.
Yeah.
I don't know if you have tried Umbrella Entertainment yet, but that's been like my newest obsession with a
Really?
social media label. I love their packaging a lot. They put a lot of, for me, like when a booklet is included, 9 times out of 10, I just don't read it because I would rather watch that stuff. They do a lot of video essays, which I will watch all the damn time. I like going into my special features after I'm done watching a movie, not like going to a book and reading it. So that's good. And
yeah,
they throw in random movies too, like a bonus movie in the special features, and that's like the best you can get, in my opinion. I love that stuff.
I'm trying to think who put out Film, the Samuel Beckett movie with Buster Keaton in it. But the supplemental stuff is worth the price of admission on that Blu-ray because it's long, because Film, that's the name of the short. It might be the last movie Buster Keaton ever did, actually. But like written and directed by Samuel Beckett. It's whatever. It's experimental. It's just for the names involved itself. You're just like, what is this? Buster Keaton made a movie with Samuel Beckett? All right. The supplemental has a live TV broadcast of Waiting for Godot, which again is one of those things where, like, I read it in high school. I'm like, I don't get it. I saw productions of it in college. I'm like, I don't get it. This live TV version stars Zero Mostel and Burgess Meredith. And you watch that, and I'm like, oh, this is phenomenal. Because you need, those two heavyweights to go in there and knock it around.
Sure.
That's worth the purchase in and of itself, Yeah,
or like 12 Angry Men on Criterion having like the old 1930s TV or 1950s TV version of it on there. It's so
right.
Or the Kino one having like the 90s version on there. Like it's I like watching different versions of the same play, especially a play like that. Yeah, just see how it goes over time.
Kino does such a great job with the commentary because they very rarely have it's just they barely even do like a flip cover where you can turn it inside out and it's a different cover of the movie. It's so matter of fact. Here's the case, here's the disc, watch it.
Sure.
But they do such a great job curating the commentary tracks. I find it's so informative and such a it's like taking a 90-minute film class on that one movie or that one genre, and it's as close as I think you get to like a Svengoolie or a Joe Bob where where we're going to stop and the horror host is going to be like, well, you might know this guy from this movie, or like, oh, he actually after this God, what movie was I watching? It was some Western. Oh God, it was some foreign Western. But like I'm watching it with the commentary on, and then they start explaining that this child actor grew up and then did like 20 or 30 years in prison for like terrorist activities in Italy. And I'm like, like I spat out my seltzer. I'm like, wait, what? And then I start like Googling that. I'm like, oh my God, I'm like, just this random. Oh, I think it was the, oh, I can't see it. It was something. Savage Guns was the name of the box set that I think Arrow put out, and it was like 4 westerns.
Okay.
And one of them, it was just like, I'm like, wait, what? That random kid like blew up something and served time. I was like, holy crap.
I have not watched the Crybaby from Kino yet, but I know one of the interviews they did was from somebody that's in prison now, which I think is very, very cool. And they actually like have video of her just doing an interview like nothing else is going on in her life.
Everything's chill.
Yeah. Oh man, good stuff. Yeah. Let's see here. Let's see here. One more question here, and then we can kind of get on. I'm interested in your thoughts here. Normally, he doesn't ask this question, but thoughts on the Triple H regime?
Anything is an improvement from Vince, but I mean, I talked about this on the most recent We Watch Wrestling podcast. I feel like, except for Bayley and Piper Niven, I didn't understand the finish of any match that just happened at Clash at the Castle.
Yeah.
And I've worked with Triple H, and Paul is not the way. And it will be interesting to see what happens. That said, the product is as hot as it's been in as many years, and
Agreed.
you know, I feel like they did a phenomenal job shifting gears when the people rejected Rock versus Roman, and Paul was smart enough to be like, oh, all right, then we need to rethink what we're going to do.
Do you think that was more Triple H, or do you think that was more like Brian and Dwayne? Because I could go 50.
Well, I don't know.
One. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I mean, and Brian Gewirtz used to be my boss. You know, when I wrote there, and Brian is Brian. The thing that was always frustrating about Brian is he would, when I was there, he just wanted to be a writer, and he's such a funny writer, and he's so good, clearly, at writing pro wrestling.
Mm-hmm.
But when I started there, he had just gotten the bump up to like SVP, so it meant he had to like go to different meetings and like more like kind of just like administrative stuff or executive stuff, or just like being in meetings that weren't solely creative writing.
Sure.
And he was miserable having to go to them. So what would always happen is he's like, as he's getting ready to leave to go to some shitty corporate meeting, he'd be like, all right, we need to think of something we're going to do with Fandango and Tyler Breeze. So, you know, do something like, and then he would throw out off the dome, the greatest pitch, the greatest idea for a segment you've ever heard of. He's like, but, you know, not that, something different, and then would leave. And then we'd be sitting there like,
how are we going to top that?
Fuck, that's all I want to see now on the show. Right. So, but I don't know. I couldn't say who was the one who was like, we got to pull the trigger on this. You know, we got to not do Rock and Roman. But it was clearly their hand was forced, and they were like, we have no choice, you know.
Right. No, I think the
swerve in that respect, like Triple H, I mean, obviously it was Rock and Roman wanted to do Rock and Roman, and that was, you know, are we going to do it in LA? Are we going to do it in Philly? When are we going to do it? But the fact that the original idea was, you know, no, we're not going to do, Cody's not going to finish the story again. It's like, guys, you're fucking blowing it. Like their hand was forced to do that. So now the follow-up has been, it's like, okay, I mean, look, after Mania, all right, we'll do the feud with AJ. It doesn't mean as much, but he's a hell of a worker. He's going to give Cody great matches. Fine. It's just placeholder stuff until SummerSlam is looming, and I don't see who the big opponent is for Cody. And isn't he supposed to be the top guy?
Sure.
I don't know. We'll see.
Well, it's Gunther, right?
Yeah, but it's like, that's not a story to me. You know,
right.
It's just he won the King of the Ring, and now here he is. It feels like another. Well, he's going to have a phenomenal match with him, and it feels like a play, because also with Rock doing, you know, publicity and being like, we're on the 1 yard line of the greatest main event in WrestleMania history. It's like, okay, I'm just sitting around waiting for Cody to get to Mania then to fight Rock because there's nothing else that you've made me interested in.
Sure.
And more power to WWE. They don't give a shit. They're just going to jack up prices and gouge people like they did in Scotland and be like, hey, we broke another record.
Mm-hmm.
More money than there's ever been. And it's like, all right, good for you. You know, it's the hubris in that place that leads to things like AEW forming, you know.
Sure. Those post conferences they have after pay-per-views just make me cringe every single time.
It's ridiculous.
Because it's all business there. Like, yeah. When Triple H comes out, it's just like, oh God, okay. How's he gonna spin this?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, very good. Thank you for coming on the podcast, man. We went wrestling a couple times, didn't know if that was gonna happen or not, but I'm always open to talk wrestling.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me. This was super fun.
Yeah. Is there anything you want to plug before we get out of here?
I mean, my TikTok is McCarthy Redhead, and if you like wrestling, I do a weekly podcast, the We Watch Wrestling podcast, and my wife and I do a podcast here and there called Watch It with Matt and Glennis, where we talk about movies and TV and TikTok. And if you want a membership card to the Video Garage,
it's in the background here. Yeah,
you can join the Patreon. I'll send one of those out to you, and you get access to the Google Drives full of, you know, unedited videotapes that I find at estate sales and secondhand and all that good stuff. And go to PeteHolmes.com. I'm on tour doing stand-up with Pete all this summer. We're going to be in Houston the first weekend of July, and we're going to be in Madison, Wisconsin, and where else? All over. Go to PeteHolmes.com and check that out.
Nice. Well, very good. Do you ever think, I don't know, on the movie club, do you ever film yourself at like estate sales or anything? I think that'd be interesting just to look at that.
I've thought about it, but I'm so like, I mean, I get uncomfortable. Like, I'll film myself going to the post office to mail the cards, and I get uncomfortable. You know, like I don't want people to see me like filming myself, and it feels, you know, it's awkward. But the thing with estate sales too is I try to be. I only once have I run into somebody who follows me on TikTok, and she was like, "Oh my God, I keep hoping to see you at an estate sale. There's VHS tapes upstairs." And I try to play it cool because I'm trying to get out of there with as much stuff at as low a price as possible.
Absolutely. Yep.
So I become a very shrewd negotiator, and I don't want to play up that like, oh, this is like part of my side hustle, you know, watching tapes on, like, I want it to appear that these have as little value to me as anything. And I'm also like, I've got more than I can handle VHS tape wise. So I'm like, I'm also, part of me is kind of looking, give me a reason to walk away. Give me a reason to leave this stuff behind.
Played so many mind games. Yeah, geez.
Because lots of times I go into a place and I'm like, I hope I find some good stuff, but I'm also like, if it's not good stuff, I'm relieved. Like, a part of me is relieved. I'm like, thank God I don't have to fucking walk out of here with 20 more VHS tapes.
Yeah, I don't have another sack on the ground.
Yeah. So I'm like, I'm begging you, give me a reason to not buy these.
Right. Well, very good, man. I'm hoping to see you film one day. But yeah, no, I totally get the whole like, hey.
I mean, maybe. I mean, I usually hit them up with my wife, and if she's, you know, stealth about it, that would be one thing.
Sure. Well, very good. Maybe one day. Yeah. Well, this has been episode. We'll see. We shall see. This has been episode number 32 of Boutique Talk. Thanks for watching and listening. And until next time, I'll see you.